Welcome to I Hate It Here, the podcast for HR and people professionals, making the hardest job in the world just a little bit easier. I'm Lia Seth.
People who only focus on work are worse at their jobs than people who do other shit. So, take your PTO, don't eat lunch at your desk, go sit outside or sit at a nice table and read a book, go to the gym, spend your weekends with your kids or your family or your friends. Don't be answering emails on a Sunday morning. Go for a walk during the day. Let your brain do real subconscious work and be a more interesting person. And you will be better at your job than if you're just sitting there grinding.
Hiring globally shouldn't require a law degree, a magic 8-ball, and a 4-leaf clover. Oyster HR brings calm to the chaos. So if you need a rockstar developer in Brazil or a marketing wizard in Berlin, Oyster lets you hire full-time or flex talent in 180 plus countries with no entity required. They handle global payroll without any complicated spreadsheets, local contracts and benefits so you don't accidentally break labor laws, and even have compliance guidance to keep you from getting fined into oblivion. Basically, they're the HR sidekick you wish you had. Visit oysterhr.com to get started. Your future international employees and lawyers will thank you. Multi-state compliance is a nightmare, but 650 makes it easy. Get instant questions to employment law questions, generate a compliant multi-state handbook in minutes, and stay ahead of changing laws with automated updates. Visit sixfifty.com to learn more. That's 650.com. Welcome back to another episode of your favorite podcast, the one where my guests and I say everything you're thinking about work, but out loud. And so far, we haven't gotten into any major trouble, but here's to hoping. Today, I'm back at it with the theme of the season of what employees really want. And we're filling in that blank today with access and accessibility. And spoiler alert, they're not the same thing. Joining me today is my good friend, Lia Seth. Lia is the director of people at Cylinder Health. She has nearly a decade of experience in HR, most of that in startups where she really gets to build and focus her work on making the employee experience accessible and inclusive. She's a lifetime Girl Scout, former pub trivia host, an outspoken disability advocate, and self-proclaimed accessibility queen. Lia, welcome to the pod.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited for this conversation. We're going to yap.
We have been planning this since March, and it is June.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of how this year is going in general. I feel like there's definitely conversations I started having in January where I'm like, oh yeah, we still need to do that.
Yeah, I guess I got to work on that now. I feel like I blinked though, I say all of that, but then I blinked and all of a sudden we're halfway through the year and I'm like, what is happening?
Yeah, truly. I don't know where 2025 has got somewhere to be or something. It's just we're rushing.
It's get out. Okay, but we're already getting distracted. I have to ask you, and I ask every guest this season. It's my fun little opening teasing question. What's one truth about work you wish more leaders understood?
Okay, I have a fake answer and I have a real answer.
Yes.
My fake answer is if your job is not something that you can find in a Richard Scarry book, it is not real and it doesn't matter. So if you are a teacher, a bus driver, a nurse, a garbage collector, congratulations, you have a real job. But if you are the associate director of interpersonal global B2B synergy, or you're the chief joy officer, or you're the senior manager of people operations, respectfully, your job is not real and does not matter. This is a joke, obviously, but I have so many friends who are teachers, and I just think about what really matters in society. And there's so many things about my job that only exist because the system is complicated. And if things were just built better, these jobs wouldn't need to exist. So that's my fake answer, is that more leaders should understand that your job really is not important and does not matter in the grand scheme of things.
Dang, we went meta and hard real fast. No, I mean, I make that joke all the time. We're just sending emails. I'm not curing cancer. But truly. I completely understand what you mean. Sometimes we just don't need to take things I hate people who make things about life and death. Everything is life and death. Oh my God, we have to get this right away, or it's all these things are going to mess up. And I'm hey, we're not actually life and death people. So let's take a pause and kind of recognize that there's this bigger world that we're a part of. that like, this is not the end of the day if this email doesn't go out at 4 p.m. exactly today.
Truly, like my friends who work in marketing, and I have a friend who like does internal documentation for engineers, and she's like, literally none of this is important. Like it does not matter. So that's my fake answer. My real answer is people who only focus on work are worse at their jobs than people who do other shit. So like take your PTO, don't eat lunch at your desk, like go sit outside or sit at a nice table and like read a book, go to the gym, spend your weekends with your kids or your family or your friends. Like don't be answering emails on a Sunday morning. Like go for a walk during the day. Let your brain do real subconscious work and be a more interesting person. And you will be better at your job than if you're just sitting there like grinding. Hustle culture is stupid.
Yeah. I mean, you've heard me say my job is like the least interesting thing about me.
Yeah.
I'm like, if it's
and like then you suddenly are in conversations with people, and especially if like your job is meeting people and networking, how boring is it? It's just like, oh, like what do you do? You're like, I work. Like, cool, what else? Nothing. Like I work. Like, wow, great, this conversation is boring, goodbye.
Yeah. There was this joke in like the DC area, and I don't know if it made it to Seattle. So like maybe because you're in Seattle, I'm in DC for those listening. You are in Seattle, right? I didn't just like
Yes.
fictionally make that entire fact up in my head of where you're located. Okay. With this like joke in DC, like how far into a date can you go before somebody asks you what you do for work? And I've heard that maybe in the Bay Area that's similar too, but
it is similar in the Bay Area, having lived most of my life in the Bay Area. I also lived in DC for a year, and the reason I left is I was 20 and everyone kept asking me, like the first thing people would ask, they're like, oh, so where are you planning to go to law school? It's like, I'm not planning to go to law school. And people would just be like, business school? Like, nope. No one knew it.
I'm trying to exist, today. Yeah. Sorry. But yeah, that was a big thing in DC. Like, what do you do for work? And I'm just like, not interesting. I just had this debate with someone recently because we were talking about the 4-day work week. And they were like, I'm surprised you're pro the 4-day work week. And I was like, people need breaks. They need to walk away from a problem. They need to do anything else. And they'll actually get better at solving the problems if you create that space.
100%. And that is why I take my little afternoon walk every day and like call my mom or listen to a podcast or something, because if I'm just at my desk thinking about work, I am often doing anything but work. I get so much done when I'm not actively thinking about work. I'll be like at the gym in the middle of the day, and then suddenly I'll be like, oh, that's how I should respond to this email. And my brain would not make that up if I was just in front of my computer.
That's me in the shower. My shower thoughts are like my best thoughts. I like wish I could write them down, honestly, because half the time I'm like, damn, that's such a good idea. I got to remember that when I get out of the shower.
I can't tell you how many times I've frantically gotten out of the shower and just like recorded a voice memo for myself. Been like, remember this.
Don't forget. I'm going to start doing that. Anyways, if you're listening to this and you're like, same, listen, you are not alone. We're all we're doing better work when we're not at work, actually. For today's episode, though, like when you and I started talking about what we wanted to talk about, and I talked about what employees really want and how we've seen like engagement at an all-time low and like burnout at an all-time high, we started talking about this idea of like access and accessibility. And so I want to kind of start there. When you hear the phrase access and accessibility, what does that mean to you in like the workplace context?
Yeah. So first, I feel like definitions are helpful. And I know you shared kind of the secret that these are not the same thing. So access means that you can get to something, you can access it. And accessibility means that you can use it. So both are important, but they are distinctly different. So concrete example, a building has a door, right? That door gives people access to the building. But accessibility doesn't come until there is a ramp to the door versus stairs. There's braille on the door marking what is inside that building. There's got to be these elements of making it actually usable. And that comes in to play a lot in a workplace context where often there's one without the other. And people think just because they're like, great, people have access, their work is done. And it's not. You really need both.
Yeah, that's such a good point. When you brought that up at first too, I was like, huh. And then I like really had to sit and think about this too. Cause I was like, I maybe sometimes also confuse them and make them the same thing, but they're really not. And like the difference can be like the difference between like a half-baked solution and an actual solution. And I think like there's a lot of misunderstandings when it comes to the difference between these two. Like not everybody is well versed in accessibility and what that means. I started my career on like the product side. So I learned about accessibility from just like how people use products. And I think about that more in the workplace. So like, what do you see as the biggest misunderstanding that companies and teams have about the difference between access and accessibility?
Again, I really think that so many times people understand access as a baseline and they think that's enough and they never think beyond it. So they'll say, okay, great. Here is this document. Here's where it lives. Everyone has access to it. We opened up access in Google Drive so everyone at the company can read this document and look at it. But it's written in this like dense legalese. No one understands it. It's filled with acronyms. It has all these references to things that you don't know. It's talking about like, oh, well, when we completed Project Alpha in 2014, and you're like, I wasn't here in 2014, so I don't understand this. And sometimes that happens so much to the point where, and then people will say like, oh, and if you have questions, just reach out. But it gets so deep that people don't even know what to ask. Like they don't even know what they don't know. So they can't even just say like, oh, what's Project Alpha? They might be like, you might really need, how does that relate? What did you learn from Project Alpha that now influences the decisions we're making today? What decisions were made around that we wouldn't have made today that we regret? Why was it named Project Alpha? Was it the first one? Did A stand for something? Like there's all this context and you don't even know what question to start with because you don't even know what's important. So thinking about, it's not just like, okay, give people the information, you also have to explain it.
Yeah. That's so funny. I like was having PTSD flashbacks as you were describing that because I've also been the person that's like, just read the document. Just read the document. And now I'm going to like walk away from this episode and be like, wow, maybe I should really stop doing that. Cause like we do write a lot of things. Like my thought is like to make things more accessible, you can't just like say them, right? So you have to write them down. And now you're making me also think about like in what context and what terms I'm even using when I'm writing things down that a person who might not understand all the context that existed before they came to the org might actually struggle with.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that leaders make is they forget that not everyone has the same context that they do. And it's not even just about like tenure and like, oh, I was at the company at this point. Maybe you were in the room for a certain conversation that someone who worked on this project wasn't. And so they don't know, here's how this decision was made, years ago. They still might not understand the full context then around your documentation. So documentation is great. We love documentation in this house. We document everything. But you've got to kind of start from a baseline of 0. So when I'm writing, to just kind of take a different tack, when I'm writing documentation on like processes for employees, like the most basic things, like, okay, we implemented a new HRIS. Here's how you request PTO in this new platform. I will start from like step 1, log into the platform. Here is the link. Step 2, like click on my settings and my time and go to time off. Like, don't start from step 1 where they're already at that page. Assume they don't even know how to get there.
Wow. I am honestly like rethinking a lot of my instructions now on everything because I just assume that a lot of times. I'm like, they know where to put their PTO, but now I'm going to go back through all my documentation and really think about like step 0.
Yeah. Step 0, I think, is a great way of putting it. I also love screenshots. And I will like, again, take it down to like a 4-year-old should be able to understand this. I'll be like, log in here, click on this button. Here's a screenshot of the website and here's where the button is. I've circled it in red. Like click here, because otherwise you're just getting all of that back and forth where people are like, okay, I'm lost. Where is this? I can't find it. I don't have it. I don't have the same view. Or people will see that and they won't know how to do it and they won't ask.
Yeah.
And then they just won't do it. And then you're like, well, why is no one following my documentation? Well,
exactly.
No one understands it.
There's that. And then there's also like something that I find kind of particularly frustrating is like when employees feel like they're being shut out, even though they're like given access to all this stuff. Like, I'm like, I gave you all access to this documentation. You knew we were doing this thing. Like, we talked about it so many times. Why do you think employees often feel shut out, even though they actually have access?
So yeah, again, it's that case of they have access, but they can't use it. So the accessibility isn't there. So the example I always talk about, I do a lot of work on handbooks and rewriting handbooks, or just writing handbooks, let alone rewriting. Like handbook doesn't exist, I got to write it. I've worked with so many handbooks that are just like, here, like the PEO gave us a handbook, so we're just using this as our handbook, and a lot of it either like doesn't actually apply to this company because we just put it into place without really looking at it, or like they said that this is the policy, but actually the way we run it is something different. Or it's written this super dense legalese where you're like, our policy is 100% fully compliant with all 50 states and federal laws, but no one knows what they're supposed to do. Like, it's great. It is like legally compliant, but it's not usable, so it's not accessible. I worked at a company once where we had done this huge handbook rewrite that I was not a part of. This was earlier in my career where I was a little more junior. But I was on the front lines of talking to every employee and every manager who had questions. It would be my phone that would ring when people didn't understand something. This was a large multi-state company. And the jury duty policy was written in a way that it was like, we're following the laws of what every state that we're in, requires for paid coverage for jury duty. This is what means, grand jury, whatever. It was all covered. But it was so confusingly written that no one understood it. And I had multiple people call me in a month, because everyone was somehow getting called for jury duty at the same time, where they were like, hey, I'm looking at the jury duty policy and I can see that it says we offer jury duty, but like how many days and how do I need to log that as time off? Do I need to send you documentation? Like, it just was not clear. And so I was talking to like 3 different people over the course of 6 weeks who all were like, do I get paid jury duty? Is it only 3 days? Is it a week? What if I'm on a larger jury? It was all in there, but they could not understand it. These are like entry-level employees. These are people who maybe it's their first job. They don't know how to read this. They've never done this before. Maybe they just turned 18. This is their first time getting called for jury duty. They don't know any part of the process. And you're asking them to figure it all out. So I went back to my manager and I said, hey, we need to rewrite this section of the handbook. No one understands it. It's confusing. And the response I got back was, well, we just redid the handbook. And if we rewrite anything, it has to go through all of these levels of approval. And we're not ready to do that right now. So we're not going to do it. So I was like, okay, great. So you're just telling me to continue spending my time answering the same question again and again.
Yeah.
So it's not only not accessible for the employees, it's now a waste of your team's time.
Yeah. Anytime I get a question more than once, that's usually when I'm like, documentation is a mess, or I need to go back and reiterate something, or I need to do a better job of communicating this thing, because I don't want my life to be, and I don't want anyone's life in HR to be just answering people's questions.
Yeah.
Like
that's not
fun.
I know. And I've told my managers many times, like, respectfully, this is not what you pay me for. Like, I have other things I need to be focused on. And obviously, like, I'm here for, the edge cases and the questions, but like the most basic thing of how many days of paid jury duty leave do we offer? You should not have to talk to a human to understand that. You should be able to just look especially since we have an employee handbook and everyone has access to it, the information should be there for people to read and understand.
I'm just laughing also because I've never gotten jury duty and I've always wanted it.
Okay,
and
same though. Every time I've gotten it,
really?
There's been 2 times that I've been called for it, and both times were like I could not do.
Oh, I've never been called for it.
One was the week I was starting a new job, and I was like, and it was like going to be a long trial, and I was like, this will actually be a financial hardship for me because they will not pay for me to be off. And it was like the week I was starting a new job. And the other one, I think I was like getting surgery that week, and I was like, I literally can't be here.
I would love to be called. I know I'm not supposed to put it out there in the world. I have had friends who have had terrible jury duty experiences. I would like to do my civic duty and be on a jury. I really think I would have such a good time, I think.
I'm so curious about it, and I have the same feeling, but I feel like you can't bring that energy into the courtroom because they're going to be like, she wants it too bad.
Yeah, they're going to be like, she's desperate. She can't do it.
We can't have her do this.
And what's the jury leader? I want to be the jury leader. Anyways, everyone who's listening to this, manifest me some jury duty. That could be a fun time, and I could turn it into like a newsletter content theme. I don't know. We'll see. They would take one look at me and be like, this girl looks desperate. We should not let her on this jury.
I think maybe you need to re-register to vote, because I feel like that gets your name back to the top of the pile.
I just did that because we moved states and I wanted to vote in the presidential election. So because we moved from DC to Virginia. So I was like,
Oh, yeah.
And we had same day registration because even when I moved and I updated my address, that now everyone's getting the T on mine. But I had to do same day registration. Anyways, that's an episode for another day. But I would love to do my civic duty. Just putting that out there. If anyone has any strings on some juries, they can. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Now you're definitely not getting called.
She was bribing people on the podcast to get her on jury.
We have this on recording that
I would just, for the record, I'm not doing anything. But if I get called, I would be honored.
I'm just curious what the process is like. I just want to see it.
I need someone to tell me. Okay, back to our episode, because you and I can take it down 50 tangents. One time we started a conversation in Vegas and we ended like 50 levels removed from our initial conversation. And I was like, we're going to be friends because we did not even address the first. Anyways, okay.
I think we actually had to come back to it like another day. So we're like, wait, we were talking about something and then we got distracted by 12 other things.
We did. Okay, but the other thing I'm thinking about too is, I mean, like I always like to touch on leadership, honestly, in everything, because I think they play such a big role in every company. Like, why do you think even access to leadership is such a barrier in some companies?
I think in some companies, and this really depends on culture, some companies and some individuals and some leaders really like overcomplicating things. And some people really just have this inflated like ego and sense of importance. And there's this feeling of like, I now have this senior leadership title. I'm now the decision maker. And even if they don't really feel that way, there's like this psychological thing that switches, right? When you have like manager and leadership duties, suddenly you're like, I'm above everyone. Again, not every manager does this, but I've seen it happen enough with like otherwise good people. And, some people who aren't so good also do this, but they're like, you have to be a certain level to like speak to me or share anything with me. And then there's this loss of, psychological safety where people can't give feedback or ask questions because their leader is like, they see this person as someone who's so above them. And even if the leader doesn't have that mindset and isn't acting that way, some people have traumatic experiences from past companies. They've worked with a manager who does have this like really ego-driven way of working. And now they're working with a leader who's really great in creating safety, but they're still stuck in that like traumatic place where they're like, my manager is untouchable. I can't ever question them. I can't ever suggest they did anything wrong by documenting this in a way that's incomplete. So now I just have to kind of live with my confusion, even if the manager would be open to that. I think, we both know there are far too many managers out there who are bad at their jobs, bad at being managers. They're on ego trips, and it's, fucking it up for the rest of us because we just want people to be okay asking questions to, like my philosophy is my favorite people to work for are people who are, favorite people to work with are people who are smarter than me. Because like, if you're not, then why am I working with you? Like, and it doesn't have to be in every single way, but in some way, like I'm absolutely all for, let's have someone who's more junior and I will mentor you. But like, there's going to be things you can teach me. Like, teach me about this platform that I know a little about and you're going to become an expert on, teach me about this way of communicating, whatever it might be. But I want to work with people who know more than me. So I love being around people who are super smart and can challenge me and, ask questions and push on my ideas a little bit. I think that's a good thing. A lot of people don't think that way. And then they make it this like fearful environment for others to ask questions and ask for clarification on things. So I think it's not every company, it's not every leader, absolutely. But there's been enough that now that fear is like widespread and people don't want to ask.
Yeah, I think leaders should always be like, there should always be access to leaders. Like skip levels, I'm such a fan of. I'm like, do a skip level, get to know other people on your team, make them see you, have a presence. I used to work with this one guy, and anytime you would ask him a follow-up question, he would literally call you stupid. He'd be like, are you stupid? Did you not pick that up the first time I said it? And I was like, you're evil, my guy. Like,
I worked with a manager. I've
What?
told this story a lot, but it always, just people are always like shook after I tell it. I worked with a manager. She would not call you stupid outright, but you would speak to her and you'd be like, she thinks I'm stupid. And she would like ask something of you. You know, she would come to me and say like, oh, this is what I'm looking for. I need you to do this, this, and this. But then she would always finish with makey sensey. Yeah. It took me so long to move past that. It literally working with her like warped my sense of reality in like what was okay to do, think, ask in a working environment. And that's kind of been a lot of my motivation, is just never allowing leaders like her to have access to anybody.
My jaw's on the floor still. I would just laugh every time she said that to me.
I was so young at that point. It was like one of my very first jobs, and just I did not know how to respond to that. But now today I tell that story to like everyone I talk to, and everyone has that same reaction. They're just like, "Oh my God."
We have to come back to this in another episode, like just a
Okay.
whole episode of all the crazy shit leaders have said to me, because like
Oh, stories. I've got stories.
I
We've
have
got
so many
stories.
stories. The one guy who called me stupid, I was just like, well, little do you know, I'm actually not. But like,
Like, joke's on you. I'm actually very smart.
I'm actually pretty fucking smart. I just like asking a lot of questions to make sure I do the work correctly. That's why I never fault anyone for asking questions. I think about that at least once a month when someone asks a follow-up question about how one time when I asked that, someone called me stupid for asking a follow-up. And I'm like, I will never be that person. We'll never be that person.
And that's why I love encouraging people to ask questions. Like if I'm leading a training and I'm the one presenting and speaking, I love creating awkward silences and forcing someone to ask. Because like I'll always say, I'm like, listen, if you have a question, I guarantee someone else has that question and they're just waiting for someone to ask. So I'll be like, great, okay, I'm going to take a pause here. Any questions? And I will literally count 20 seconds. If you've ever sat in silence for 20 seconds, people get uncomfortable fast. Usually it takes less than 9 seconds for someone to ask a question.
I would be yapping second two. Second two, be like, so hey guys, y'all folks, help. Like that would be me.
So I do that, and I also love anticipating people's questions. So like I'll be explaining something and then I'll recognize like, oh, this is context that I have that other people don't. So let me quickly be like, for background, this is what this means.
You may be thinking, let me tell you. I always do that in trainings too. That's so funny. I want to talk a bit about, like, we've touched on leaders, we've touched on companies. I want to talk like a real tactical example. Like, can you give me one example of like a small change that can create genuine access for employees?
Yeah. Something that I love doing is publishing a pay philosophy. So this is a common thing. We've all seen it in engagement surveys, feedback surveys. Like, I feel like I'm underpaid. I don't think my salary is fair. I feel like I could be making more. And it's always like, I think, I feel, I believe, like there's no facts there. And if they don't have the facts, it's because you haven't given it to them. So I love publishing that and saying like, here's how salary decisions are made at work. Here's the factors that go into determining a pay range. Maybe we look at location, maybe we don't. Maybe it's, job description, job level. Here's how we determine the job level for each title. Here's how we determine what title you are, whether you're a software engineer or a senior software engineer. We write all that down so it's clear, and then you publish it in a handbook or in an intranet or something, and you tell people where it is, and you write it in plain language, and you add nice little graphics so that people can see what you're talking about. And it builds huge trust, because then you don't have employees saying things like, well, I don't really know how my salary was set, and I feel like I could be paid more, or I think this, or, well, this other company pays way more. And then you can say things like, well, that other company is a, multi-million-dollar publicly traded company, and we are a venture-backed Series B company with 100 employees. Like, people who don't work in comp or in HR don't necessarily think about that. They just see like, well, my job title is engineer, and if I worked at Google, I could make this much. It's like, yes, well, if you worked at Google, maybe you would be on call 7 days a week, or maybe you would have these different responsibilities. Maybe you would be a little more specialized. Whereas here, maybe we've got a different culture, and that's why you like it. Maybe it's a smaller team, so you have a bigger impact on the final product. Maybe we offer a different suite of benefits. Like there's all these factors into it, and publishing that and making that really clear and explaining your decision making, that to me is where the accessibility comes in. So the access part is I'm going to publish my pay philosophy. The accessibility part is I'm going to explain how these decisions are made and like really, really list out this is why your salary is the way that it is. And then if you want to look at that and say, hey, I think I actually should be in the band for a level 3 instead of a level 2, that's a different conversation. And that's a conversation that then I'm open to because like, great, we're coming in with the same information, let's talk.
My favorite thing is when managers just assume that hiring globally is simple. It's giving Elle Woods what? Like it's hard? Nah, it's a bit more complicated than most people realize. There's compliance, payroll rules, and local benefits to consider. Luckily, Oyster HR has your back. They handle all the global employment technicalities in over 180 countries, so you don't have to know everything, because that would be impossible. Now you can hire anywhere, stay compliant, and pay teams seamlessly. Go to oysterhr.com and make your next international hire the easiest thing you've done. Is it just me, or does multi-state HR compliance feel impossible to keep up with? 650 is here to help. With 650, you can generate handbooks, hiring paperwork, separation agreements, and more that's compliant in all 50 states. As laws change, your documents update automatically. Consider it your secret weapon for staying compliant without losing your mind. And with 650 AI, you can ask employment law questions in your own words and get quick, reliable answers without all the legalese. No more hunting down state law information, no more outdated policies, just peace of mind. Visit 650, to see why HR teams love 650. That's 650.com. Yeah. Oh, that's such a good example. I love, compensation philosophies are my jam. I love them so, so much that like pay philosophy is a really good way to give that access and accessibility that we don't often think of, honestly. Like when I initially conceived this question, I was really curious, what you were going to come up with. And this is honestly the most perfect example. And I think a lot of people, you'd be surprised the amount of times I talk about pay philosophies and people are like, we don't have one. I'm like, that was the first thing I did when I got to work week. I was like, we have to document how we make these decisions. Otherwise, how are we making these decisions?
And the thing is, if you don't have one, you do. It's just bad.
That's
like this when people are like, oh, we don't have a culture. It's like, no, you probably have one, but it's not good.
It's not good.
You got to set these things with intention. Otherwise, they're just going to be kind of crap.
Yeah. I mean, remember when I told you earlier that I started my career kind of in tech, thought I was going to be a product manager someday, and then pivoted and went into HR, which people are my products. That's a whole separate little funny thing I say, but that really is the first time I encountered accessibility. And I'm thinking more broadly just throughout this episode, because I think you're making so many good points. I have such accessibility in a box kind of, and you're bringing up so many other things that I am ashamed to say, I hadn't really thought were accessibility things. And so one piece that my mind always gravitates towards when I'm thinking about accessibility is the tools we pick, the actual digital tools. And I want to talk a little bit about how those digital tools and platforms can actually sometimes unintentionally create accessibility issues. How do you deal with that? And how have you encountered that in this work?
Totally. I mean, a lot of digital tools were created by a certain group of people for a certain group of people. And let's be honest, it's usually not the people who look like us or think like us. If we look at, we can just take AI as an example, right? You have these tools that are telling people this is the correct way to communicate, or, help me write this, help me explain this, and here is the correct way to communicate it. And it's a very neurotypical response you often get from AI. And it doesn't take into account these different ways of thinking, these different ways of communicating and getting across information. If you keep it to what AI spits out at you, sometimes it's too high level, especially if you're only giving it high level information. So I love, if I'm going to use it, I'll ask it the same question in different ways and then combine all the answers into something that actually really gives a holistic answer that can be used by everybody. Like if I'm using it to draft a policy, I don't want to just take what it gives me. I need to also build in, okay, let's look at some other angles. And then also, I can't just use the information it gives me. I also need to use my own knowledge of my company's culture and, the way people communicate to build that in also. So I think a lot of times there's, and especially recently, there can be an overdependence on digital tools. And that human element is still really, really important. A lot of digital tools can move really fast. It's just like, let's throw something into AI. Okay, please write me a parental leave policy. Okay, great, it wrote it. I'm just going to throw that in the handbook. No, you need to look at it and say, okay, well, how have we done this in the past? What precedent have we already set? Let's make sure that this is like written out in a way. Okay, this talks about FMLA. What if people don't know what FMLA is? Can we go back and explain that? This policy is talking about bonding leave. Do people know what that means? This is talking about pregnancy leave. Do people know what pregnancy leave is? Can we define that? A lot of these are written out in a way that, again, there's an expectation that people have this baseline understanding. And you really need to write them in a way where you expect people to have no understanding. Not because you think they're stupid, but because you think, let's make it easier for them to understand this without having to ask follow-up questions. Because again, things move so fast, people don't have time then to raise their hand and say, hey, I don't understand this, because we've already moved on.
Yeah, it's about removing those barriers, right? Like not everybody works the same. That's the part about accessibility that I think when we first started talking about this, like really excited me because I've been doing my like research on being like neurodiverse and how do you support people in the workplace that are neurodiverse? Like you think about so many of our processes, they're just like they're really built for like one type of person, like exactly what you said at the very beginning. And it's so interesting. It's like all of us are going to use tools differently. Even like digital accessibility is really fascinating to me. Again, product mind. So like I think about all these things when I'm like interfacing with products, but we've been talking internally about how ChatGPT has like the voice capture thing that you can do now. So instead of typing, like maybe instead you can do voice. And that to me, when they introduced that, I don't know if it always had that, but I thought that that was like a good step in the right direction because people will engage with it differently. Some people are auditory, like they want to speak out their thoughts. Other people want to write out their thoughts. And I even thought that was just really interesting as I'm thinking through like reviews is a really good example. Like in our performance review software, can somebody like talk to text it? Or do they have to go use another software and then drop it into the software? And then is it a million steps? And then they feel like they can't actually synthesize their thoughts well for the review. Like that to me is like a really interesting piece. Performance reviews are already like hella stressful. But then I think about how they're like actually not accessible to a lot of people because they're like, sit down, fill this out within this timeline, answer these questions in this box. Like, what if people just don't process that way?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I love that you brought that up. Like voice to text is such a savior to me because I am such a like verbal processor. If I just sit down in front of an email that I know I need to send, I like something about it, I just can't do it. So when I said that I will literally record voice memos to myself, I mean that I've been doing this since college and did not know that this was like an accessibility tool for myself where I will just set a timer, set a recording, and just start talking. And voice to text has been great for this because then I don't have to transcribe it later, which is what I did in college. But now, I can just speak into my notes app basically and say, like, this is basically what I want to say in this email. I want to ask this question. I want to make sure I clarify this point. I want to remind this thing. And then I can clean it up after I've, like word vomited all over my notes app. But it's so much easier and I get things done so much faster than if I just sat there in silence trying to type. It's just not how my brain works. So again, I love the idea of building those tools in more, where can you speak it? Can you, instead of looking at a blank box and having to type things, can you say it? And will that be easier for people?
Yeah, I even think about like we use Read AI sometimes in meetings, which like I was very critical of like AI note takers at first, because I was like, oh my God, like when we're in HR, we're like saying confidential things on some of these meetings. Like, I don't want no AI note taker to like misinterpret the very confidential thing I was saying. And now I think about it as like, some people cannot be present in a meeting and participate fully and also take notes at the same time. And to me, I'm like, it's actually like better accessibility for everyone if there's like a little machine taking notes, for lack of a better way of describing it. Because like when you think about like note taking duties, oftentimes it's delegated to like the most junior person in the room. Like that was like a big conversation like 5 years ago. Like, why is it always the junior person in the room? And like we should create more inclusion by letting other people take notes. And I'm like, or we can let the little machine take the notes and like remind me of all the things that I said, so that because I couldn't write them all down and remember.
And think about going back to, again, accessibility. Having the most junior person in the room take notes,
Foul.
actually not a good idea because,
Foul.
again, they're the least likely to have context. They're not going to understand some things that you're saying. If you're throwing around acronyms they've never heard of, they might be writing them down wrong. Then they're going to look at these notes. The rest of the group's going to look at these notes and be like, what were we talking about? Like, what is this? I don't understand what was written out here because the person taking the notes didn't understand. So it really is an accessibility tool in that way. I love it for, my one-on-one meetings with my manager, but I do still take my own notes. And I think the combination works really well for me because I'm like, I've written down my action items, but if I forgot something, it's captured in the notes from the little machine.
I also write down. We probably should stop calling it the little machine. The people listening to this are like, what are these two doing? But I like the little machine,
It's the little guy who lives
I'm
inside
just
Zoom.
trying to have some fun. Okay. Okay. So when I think of the opposite of access and accessibility, okay, when I think of like the opposite for a second, I kind of think of like gatekeeping. So
Mm-hmm.
where do gatekeeping behaviors still show up in the workplace, and how do we actually like dismantle that?
I think it goes back a little bit to that ego side where some people just really love to be the person with the answers. But then it's also, I think, not necessarily like the self-inflated importance thing. It's like if they share information instead of hoarding the information, they become obsolete. They have this belief. So it's like a self-preservation thing. They're like, I can't put that out there because if no one needs to call me with questions, then like I've just documented myself out of a job. It's something that I feared very early on. I would be like, well, if I write all this stuff down, so much of my job is like answering these people's questions every day. And if I don't have to answer their questions every day, like, what am I going to do? And the answer is grow. You're going to do more important things and like more effective things. And the reality is there's always more information to share, right? I talked earlier about edge cases. Like I hate when handbooks say, oh, yeah, we offer leaves of absence for medical and parental leave. So if you need to take one of those, talk to HR. Like, okay, what if people want to know before they talk to HR, like, how much leave can they take? Okay, you're offering medical leave. Is it 12 weeks of paid leave? Is it 4 weeks of leave? Is it 12 weeks of leave, but only 4 are paid and the other 8 aren't? Is it 12 weeks of leave on paper, but like, really, my manager's going to be mad if it's any more than 4? Like, you can write all of these things down, and put in there, here's the information you need to have. We offer 6 weeks of paid medical leave, an additional 2 unpaid with the doctor's note, or whatever that might be. But write it down because people will still come with edge cases. They might say, well, can I take this intermittently? That should be written down too. What if I need to take leave for a family member? That should also be written down. Those edge cases will come up. And then that's where I think documentation, it has to be like a living document. That's why I hate the like, oh, our handbook has already been approved and we can't edit it.
No, it's
Okay,
got to be edited all the time.
No, because every time someone has a question, you need to add to it. Why are we gatekeeping information? It makes your job more complicated and more like, just like you're having to focus on so many things that you do not need to spend your time on. Like there's so many times early in my job where I would be trying to do something or trying to think about something, and I wouldn't even have the capacity to think about something because I'm having to answer the same question 4 times a day from people who just don't know how to read it because it's been written in a way where they can't read it. So I think it's just, I mean, really the end point there is really just like be generous with your information because there's always going to be more to give. And the more generous you are with your information, the more comfortable people will be asking for the details that they really need.
Yeah.
Because no one wants to be that person that's like, well, how much of this leave do I get? How much is paid? How much is,
Right.
and they ask all these 5 questions and then they don't get to the one thing that they really need to ask.
Yeah. My favorite is when an employee slacks me like, I'm not trying to bug you, but can you tell me more about it? And I'm like, you're not bugging me. Like, technically, it's my job to tell you more about these things, but every time it like almost pains me because I'm like, damn it, I need to go explain this better. Like, right back to what you said, like, they don't, employees, it's very vulnerable to ask a question. Now, imagine you're asking a question and then you have to like disclose, and you're not like, I tell employees, like, you do not have to tell me anything you don't want to tell me when you're asking questions. But like, imagine they have a question about a medical situation because they are having a medical situation. And I'm just like, it is so vulnerable for them to tell me any of these details. I personally am like, I don't want to force them into telling me something that they don't want to be telling me or they're not comfortable telling me. But I like think about that a lot because I mean, thankfully my employees feel safe coming to me, but like the psychological safety it takes to like go to HR and ask for access, I think is critical, but oftentimes employees don't really have that psychological safety with their HR team.
Yeah. And that's why I really love working at startups. I have been in startups for what, 5, 6 years. I really, really like this like Series B, Series B space, B, C space where like I generally know, if not every employee, like I can have a conversation with everyone and no one will freak out. Then we'll be like, well, we've never spoken before. Like, why are you talking to me? Or like, I don't know how to ask you anything because you don't know who I am. Like, I know who everyone is. I'm not at these companies with like thousands and thousands and millions of people. Because when I was at those companies, it again, there's that barrier of access of like, I don't feel safe asking these questions because I don't know this person. I don't have a relationship with this person. I've never met this person, like, what are they going to say? And so many people have had bad HR experiences. And I hate that. I hate that so much. But that's a lot of, why I'm here. Like access should be a given, but it's not. And so if employees don't have that trust in their HR teams, in leadership, that those questions will be treated with the care that they deserve and not held against them and not like used as ammo later or not, whispered around later like, oh, well, so-and-so was asking about this. Like, do you really think, they have to have that trust. Otherwise they won't ask. And if they don't ask, then no one's going to get the access or accessibility they need. Someone has to kind of bring that up to say, hey, I don't understand this. One person asking is all it takes to then open the door for everyone else. But ideally, it should all be documented already. No one has to ask. But again, we are human, right? Like, I know that I've spent a lot of time writing my handbook, and I know there's things that aren't in there that should be because people still ask me questions. And it's great when people ask me questions because then I'm like, hey, great, let me get you an answer to this. And then I'm going to update the handbook so that anyone else with a question can have the same information.
Yeah. It like breaks my heart the amount of my friends that text me and are like, hey, can I ask you an HR question? Because I don't want to ask my HR person.
I get that a lot.
I'm like, yeah, hit me, but like you should be able to ask your team this. And it's just like so many people are scared. Like, listen, we are not in the best of times. I feel like I bring this up every episode. Like the job market's incredibly tough. If you have a job, a lot of people are just staying because they're scared of what's happening out there in the world. And it's like employees are under an immense pressure and feel unsafe a lot of places in the world. And it's kind of like our job as HR to make them feel as safe as we possibly can within our environments, right? Knowing that like the world outside is still happening, but like how do we show up and try to make it easier for them is like something I honestly challenge myself and my team with every day. It's like people should not feel like they have to come to us to get answers. People should feel like they know how to get them. They understand everything, and they shouldn't be also scared when they need to come to us to talk about a unique edge case. But like I feel like so many places that's the case.
Yeah. Or, again, they don't have that relationship. They don't have that safety. They don't have that understanding. And so I've had friends come to me and I've like coached friends through their parental leaves. I'm like, send me your company handbook. Like, I will help you figure out what to do. I will write the email to your HR for you. Like, because like it's like, they're like, well, I don't understand, like, what happened. You know, I had a friend who was like, hey, if I don't come back from my maternity leave, like, am I going to owe my company? And I'm like, that's going to depend. Like, send me the handbook and I'll see what I can figure out. But like, why isn't this written out?
It feels like a lot of people prefer to not say the thing. I'm like,
Yeah.
we should be as direct as possible. Like sometimes my CEO is like, you're too transparent. And I'm like, I'm too transparent because when they're not getting it, guess who they're coming to?
Yeah, I'm transparent for my own self-preservation of my mental state because I cannot keep answering these same questions again and again.
And because
I'm
they deserve to know. They
Yeah.
deserve to know.
And also, like, you want engagement scores to go up? Tell people things. Like, it is literally that easy.
So easy. Just fucking tell them. Just
I had,
fucking
you know,
tell them.
I worked at a company once where we were able to offer this benefit to our US employees, but not internationally, because we got this like deal through our PEO for this benefit. And it was like a really low cost. We couldn't offer the same thing internationally, but we did offer a stipend. And one of the international team members came to me and they were like, hey, like, I just want to understand, like, you know, it's a real bummer that we don't get this. You know, why aren't we getting the same thing? You know, why? And I know we're getting a stipend, but it's like not going to cover it. And I went back and I was like, listen, we got this as a discount deal through, you know, our HRIS, through our PEO, whatever. And this is what we're paying. So we're basically offering what we're paying per employee to you. We know that it doesn't cover the same thing, but this way, as a company, we're paying basically the same for every employee. And she was like, oh, okay, so it's a budget thing. Like, that makes sense. I didn't realize that you were able to like get this deal. Cool, great. Like, bummer we don't get it, but like, that makes sense. I was like, that was literally all it took. And I think if our leadership had had it their way, they would not have had me answer that so directly. I was like, literally, we can just tell them that it's a budget thing. And it's not even like, oh, budget, we're in trouble. It's like, no, we got a discount and we were able to pass that on, but only within the US. And so that's why.
I think about that. I think about this all the time, all the time. I want to kind of end our episode talking a little bit about, wow, end our episode. I'm getting way ahead of myself, but I want to spend like the second half talking about like making real change at work and what the future could potentially look like. So we've touched on this a lot, but how can companies actually move beyond performative accessibility where it looks good on paper, but isn't actually felt day to day?
Yeah, I think a lot of it, again, is like that conflating of access and accessibility, is they think that because people have access, their job is done. And then they're just like, but look how accessible we are. And it's like, well, not quite. This is less about accessibility than inclusion, but I do have an example of performative inclusion that I just feel like you'll find funny, and a lot of your listeners will find funny too. I worked with a leader who would use ableist language a lot, and like didn't mean anything by it. Like, this leader would basically be like, oh, this is crazy, this is stupid, this is so dumb. And employees were giving consistent feedback like, hey, this is really hurtful and harmful to people with, you know, cognitive conditions, with mental disabilities, with learning disabilities. Like, a lot of people on the team were like, hey, I have this condition and this like really hurts every time you use this word so casually. You know, it's very valid feedback. It's something that leader definitely should have heard and worked on to create psychological safety. It's something I'm working on. That's something a lot of us are. And then what that leader decided to do is, not in response to this, but totally separately, you know, we had our monthly all hands meeting or whatever, and the leader decided to rename it from all hands because all hands, they determined, was not inclusive to people who don't have hands. And like,
I'm not going to lie. I heard this story and I laughed so hard.
I get kind of where the intent was there, but like, not helpful.
Not at all.
So I think really it's, again, performative accessibility, not the same thing as performative inclusion, but like definitely related. It's still a problem. And again, it comes down to leaders thinking that they understand what they're solving when they're just not hearing the feedback that their teams are giving. So really, moral of the story here is just like, listen to your people. Like, you ask them for feedback all the time, take the feedback and do something with that instead of like deciding what is a problem. And like, was the name a problem? Maybe for some people. As far as I know, no one was saying anything about it. I think other people might have thought differently. Like, I know some people take umbrage with the term like daily stand up, or like, oh, I don't like that it's called a stand up meeting because some of us, need to sit down. That's fine. That's, I've definitely taken that stand before. But it's about the feedback, right? Like if no one's giving you that feedback, but they're giving you feedback on something else, why are you solving the made up problem?
Yeah.
Then you're still using the terms that people find offensive.
Yeah. That's how I removed lame from my language because I used it. I think I might have put it in a newsletter where I was like, "Oh, that's so lame," and a reader wrote in and was like, "Hey, just a heads up, like that's ableist language." And here's
I'm
what
pretty sure I was that reader.
Maybe, yeah. And
I think that was me.
I probably replied and I was like, "Thank you. I will remove that from my language immediately." I did not realize that there's so many things that we said growing up that are just like culturally not appropriate today.
Totally. And I think there's things that we use today that we'll realize in like 5, 10, 15 years, we're like, wow, I cannot believe that was part of our like regular vernacular.
Yeah. Like lame, crazy. And I think when someone tells you that stuff is not okay, like you show them who you are in that minute. You can either show them like, yes, I accept what you were saying and I appreciate you feeling comfortable to tell me. And then I'm not going to be performative about this because I am going to change my actions moving forward versus like getting all that feedback and then being like, I'm going to take issue with this one other thing that has nothing to do with anyone has complained about, but I'm going to use it as my like coup d'etat. Like, look at this thing. I'm going to change it when it has like nothing to do with what everyone is telling you. Like, be for real.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, again, just focus on the actual issue. Stop making up problems. Like there are enough real problems that we really need to solve. Inclusive language is definitely one of them. If people are telling you that that's something you need to focus on it. Especially if like you want to, again, create psychological safety. You want to create a space where people feel comfortable asking questions, asking for clarification. You're really just showing them, well, this is how I respond to feedback. And now people aren't going to give it anymore.
Yeah. If there's like one internal process that you think almost every company should revisit with that accessibility lens, what would it be?
Oh my God, spell out your acronyms. It is my pet peeve. People will just be flinging out acronyms left and right. I have made it my personal mission in our all hands meetings. Every time someone uses an acronym, I'm there in the chat, like spelling it out. Or if I don't know what it is, I will ask. Every acronym I will ask. I'll be like, hey, what is this? Hey, what is this? By the way, OKR stands for this. By the way, SLT stands for Senior Leadership Team. Like I will literally spell out every acronym so that everyone knows. And I've had people message me privately and be like, thank you so much for like continuing to make sure the acronyms are spelled out. So I'm like, listen, I'm not the only one who doesn't know these things. And even if I do know it, I know other people don't because I've been in meetings where, in all hands, we'll talk about OKRs all the time. And I was in a small group meeting recently where someone even asked, what's an OKR? I was like, oh my God, we have been using this in all hands for
and
months.
They don't even know.
And they don't know what it means.
That's very helpful.
Spell out everything. Like the first time you use it, not just the first time you use it ever, the first time you use it in a meeting, spell it out. And again, it's not about assuming people are stupid. It's about assuming they don't have the same context as you. And you want you're talking, you're speaking so that you're giving information, right? So why would you not want them to have all the information?
Oh, that's a good point. I'm going to go back. I think in almost every single time I've ever used an acronym, the first time I use the acronym, I put in parentheses what it means. And then moving forward in the document, I use the acronym.
Yeah. Which is like, I think the standard, correct, normal way to use it. But so many people don't do that and they just don't think about it.
Well, even in my newsletter, I do like L&D and somebody wrote in and was like, what does this mean? And I was like, oh, it's like learning and development. It's the shorthand for learning and development. And I was just like, oh, if you're reading my newsletter, you must be in HR, you must know.
Right.
And then I was like, actually, like a lot of our acronyms, like people might not know too.
Yeah. And so I think it's a lot of it is know your audience, right? Like if you're writing a newsletter, you have to know, who's reading this. Is this really a niche group or is it spreading? If you're speaking at a company event, is my audience all leadership team members who have been part of these discussions and have the same context I do? Or is this the whole company, including entry-level folks or folks who work on a different department and have never touched this and don't know what this means? And do I need to spell it out for them?
Yeah.
And the answer usually is yes, you do. Even
Always.
if you're not sure, just do it.
Yeah. Well, what advice do you have for leaders who want to foster that like more open access to information, but are actually like worried about overwhelming people?
I really love making things self-serve and like organizing a little bit. So anytime I put out any kind of announcement, I do a TLDR, too long, didn't read at the top, like 3 sentences. Here's what's happening. We're making this change. It is effective on this date. There's no action needed, but you're going to see a different portal when you log in here. And that's going to take effect on this day. If you want to learn more, here's an FAQ. And that way people who are like, okay, great, this doesn't really affect me, I can move on, can. But if people are like, wait, I had something to do with this, or like, I work in this portal a lot, what else does this mean? Then we got an FAQ. Why is this happening? Why is this happening now? What teams is this going to affect? Will this change any of my other processes? I love writing that out. I ask every single question. I love a detailed FAQ because if I think of a potential question someone could ask, someone's probably going to ask it or wants to ask it, but doesn't know how or doesn't feel safe doing it. So why not just spell it out?
You're so funny because we're so similar. Like whenever we run a process, I almost always write a guide for employees and a guide for managers. And always in the manager guide, the very end is a FAQ. And I'm like, your employees may ask this. Here's what you need to know. And how I even put like how to reply.
Yeah.
So that they know how to reply. Because I'm like, if you are scared to answer a question as a manager, we have a bigger problem. But also, here's how you can reply to this when you're scared.
Yeah, absolutely. I love giving managers scripts. Like I've done feedback training where I'm just like, okay, let's talk about performance. Let's talk about when someone's performance is really, really good. Let's talk about when there's room for improvement. What do you say? And some people think they're like, oh, when it's really good, it's easy. Well, you still need to know what to say because you also want to set expectations. If someone's doing really well, but like there's no budget for promotion, how do you share that? If someone's doing really well and you want to give them more responsibilities and move them up a level and pay them more, that's a different conversation. And what points do you want to hit? If someone's not doing well and it's been a one-time thing, here's how to do it. If there's a pattern, here's how to do it. Here's the scripts. Like it's so easy to just arm people with information. And again, if they choose to use it or look at it or not, great, but then it's there.
I think something really interesting is like intersectionality and privilege and how they influence which employees actually get access and whose accessibility needs to be prioritized. How do you think about that?
I think it's like intersectionality and accessibility and inclusion. Like these are all such big buzzwords. And I think there's been a lot of conversations had around intersectionality, which is good, but it's starting to lose its meaning, which means people boil it down and simplify it to be something just like quick, snappy, palatable, but it's really messy and complicated. So you really can't oversimplify intersectionality. So like when you think about inclusion or diversity, most people will immediately jump to like gender inclusion, racial inclusion, LGBTQ plus inclusion, and they won't think about like disability or neuroatypical. So there's that level of it where you have to think about it on different lenses. It's not just like one thing. It's not just like diversity is race and gender. Like, okay, great. Maybe the EEOC only looks at those, but like there's so much more, right? So I always think about who's in the room when decisions get made and who can influence what that is going to look like for people. So my example is I have, planned company offsites before. There's a company offsite that I was invited to that I wasn't on the planning committee for. And I was really excited about it. And when I went, there were, some breakout activities like, okay, here's a bunch of work we're going to do. And now there's like different activities we can do and you can choose which one. But when I got there, it was like, great, you can go and do this beach cleanup or you can do this hike. I was like, I can't do either of those. What about like, I physically can't be on my feet for that long. Like I have a physical disability. is there something else I can do? And like, we had another employee who had recently broken her leg. We had another employee who was like about to go on maternity leave, and another one who had just gotten back from maternity leave. And I was like, is there no like sedentary activity here? Like, could we not have thought about this? And clearly, like, no one in the room on that planning committee thought about that potential, like, I don't want to say edge case, but like that potential experience, right? Of the employees who were not going to have that same level of ability to go physically clean up beach or go on a hike. So when I planned an offsite last year, and we were like, okay, great, we're going to do these like breakout activities. We, people really want to be outside. We're a very active company, but like, let's go do kayaking. And I was like, hey, let's do something inside where people can sit down. So we also did a paint and sip. So we're like, great, everyone's going to get a little tote bag and some paints. And we're going to have a woman come in and like teach us all how to like do some basic like painting techniques. And that was really nice because, again, like an employee who had like recently had an injury wanted to do that. There was an employee who was like, hey, I get really bad heat stroke. I just really want to be where it's air conditioned. Those people who were like, I'm really not vibing with the water, so I would just like to be inside.
Would never. We always give options. I love that.
Exactly. Yeah. And options that actually meet people's different needs, interests, and abilities.
Yeah, because not everybody wants to go outside.
Yeah, if you plan for the most marginalized group, you're actually going to meet everyone where they are.
Love that. This is such a good advice. I always end every episode with like a future question and an advice question. So if you could wave a magic wand and give every employee one thing that they are asking for in this space, what would it be?
I mean, is like whatever they need acceptable? Like, I feel like that's not a real answer, but I think really it's like, if it was just one thing, I would say the safety to ask in the first place. Like, I know you're asking like, oh, what's the one, like give them one thing they're asking for. I think the problem is they're not asking because they don't feel safe to do it, or they don't have the confidence that it will be safe to ask. So I think I would give them the safety to ask, the confidence in that safety that like, you will be supported here, you will be respected here, and you'll be taken care of, and you'll get your answer, and nothing's going to be held against you.
Tall order, but I think we could make it happen. I think we could wave that wand. I think we could do it. And one final fun question. What's one buzzword or corporate phrase around accessibility or access that drives you absolutely nuts?
Okay, yeah, this I thought about for a second, and then as soon as I thought about it, I was like, oh my God, ADA compliant. Listen, I'm on record as being very grateful for, but also heavily critical of the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA. Listen, it's a good start, but it has stayed a good start. It is an imperfect law, and I have talked about this a lot. So hit me up if you ever want to talk about the ADA, because I will rant about it forever. But basically, something being compliant with the law does not mean it's accessible. And that goes for websites, that goes for buildings, that goes for products, that goes for policies. It's like something being legal and lawful is often not enough.
That is such a good place to end this episode, because we're going to come back for part 2 on ADA at some point, and a million other things that we want to talk about. But
yes, please.
I always link your LinkedIn in the show notes, but for people who want to get in touch with you, any other best ways other than LinkedIn?
I am on LinkedIn way too much. My problem is I've been trying to temper down my usage of other social media, but that has just resulted in me spending more time on LinkedIn. So unfortunately, LinkedIn, send me a message, let me know that you heard the show, and that will be a good way to get in touch with me, because otherwise I get way too many just like random messages of like, hey, do you want to join this like master's program? Like, no, what? Who are you?
I don't. I want to talk to real people. Anyways, Thank you so much for today, for this episode. It's been a long time in the making. You're a friend of the pod. You'll be back. We have so much more to talk about, and I'm just so grateful for getting time to yap with you.
This was always so much fun. Thank you so much for the chat, and we'll do it again.
Yay, can't wait.
Thanks for tuning in. Keep up with all the latest HR resources by subscribing on Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you listen. And if you love I Hate It Here, tell an HR friend. I'll see you next time.